Welcome to our fourth session where we're going to talk now about strategies for leading through conflict productively. We've already talked about why we have conflict and the types of conflict. How do we move forward? The first strategy is to make conflict communication all about the mission. Of course, first you have to define what your mission is. The church I have the blessing of leading's mission is helping people grow deep in the love of Jesus and branching out to others with that love. If you are not clear about your mission, you really should pause in the process and spend some time clearly identifying and articulating your mission, because it is the most significant piece of conflict resolution that you have. And if it is muddy, then conflict resolution will be difficult. The first thing you need to know is, what is your mission? Ours is helping people grow deep in the love of Jesus and branching out to others with that love. Now, communication is a key to conflict resolution. In fact, many people think that it is the key to conflict resolution. I just simply say it is a key, an important key, but clarity of mission is the key to conflict resolution. You may remember I've said that you never surrender the mission to people who want a job. But if you don't know what the mission is, you don't know how to tell the difference in people who are on mission with you and who just want a job. But when you're clear about the mission, then a lot of other conflict resolution pieces become very clear and much easier. So for example, if you are clear about your mission, you don't have to make conflict communication full of random observations. You can keep the conflict communication centered on how they are or are not fulfilling the mission of the church organization. For example, the mission is not providing you a job. The mission is not employee happiness. In fact, employees or people on mission find happiness in vocation as they become clear about their reason for working. The mission. Our mission is growing deep and branching out. That's what we work on. If you don't want to work on that, you don't want to work with us. If you want a job, you will be much happier somewhere else. Very early on, we had someone who didn't want to work on the mission. They wanted to earn a paycheck. I told her she couldn't stay. She did not go well, but she went. Some people also you will find they want to advance their career or their mission by using you or using your mission. We had someone who wanted to build their business by pointing at the work they were doing for us, but they didn't care about our mission at all. We were just a tool. We were just being used. When the conversation about mission is clear, then you can say, this is our mission, and if you don't want to work on it, you should work somewhere else. Now, be prepared for discomfort, because when you focus the conversation on missional alignment, then you'll be faced with some discomfort. You might have to say, I'm sorry for things that you're really not responsible for. Don't let their feedback distract you from keeping the conversation on mission. You'll be talking about the mission, and they will say things like, well, you didn't ask about my children when they were sick, or you didn't offer to give me time off when my mother was sick, or you never or you won't. If they bring something up that is a distraction from the conversation, take responsibility for it. I'm sorry, and return to the mission conversation. This is the act of leadership. This is the responsibility of leaders. It's what Jesus did for us. He took responsibility for our sin, and he was not responsible for it. An additional strategy for dealing with conflict is to let our conversations be full of grace and truth. John chapter 1, verse 14 describes Jesus this way. He was full of grace and truth. We somehow miss that word full often when we look at that verse. We think that Jesus was sometimes full of grace at the expense of truth, or sometimes full of truth at the expense of grace. But Scripture tells us that he was always fully graceful and always fully truthful. Now, we don't have the capacity in our brokenness to be fully those things, but in our responsibility as leaders, the pursuit of being full of grace and being full of truth should be one of our highest aims. If we speak grace without truth, it's permissiveness. It's almost as if we don't care. Do whatever. It doesn't matter as long as you're happy. If we speak truth without grace, it can be harsh. If we don't have any consideration for people who are in a circumstance where they're not able to perform always the way we want them to because of some extenuating circumstances, if we don't make allowance for that, then we're not being loving or graceful. We're just so focused on the truth that we're burning people and using people. Often people say, I want to speak the truth in love. I think I would move away from that, because sometimes we think that it's permission to lovingly speak the truth, but most of us don't know how to do that. I think a better phrase and something we can better get our minds around when we see Jesus is asking ourselves, is this truthful and is this graceful? It's not either or. Is this truthful without being graceful? We don't speak. Is this graceful without being truthful? We don't speak. It's not either or. If we want to lead through conflict well, our conversation should be missional focused, and it should be both truthful and graceful. Paul writes to the Colossians, let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you ought to answer each person. That's Colossians 4:6. Now, Paul is talking about how to have conversations with people who are not believers. But the principle might be applied to people who are not likely to be receptive to what you have to say to them. Another strategy for leading through conflict is to keep control of the tone. Proverbs chapter 15, verse 1 says, a soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. When the church that I lead was leaving the denomination we had been part of for 19 years, we were in conflict with our bosses, with the overseers of the denomination, and they wanted to fight. We made it clear we were not going to fight. We were going to do what we were supposed to do to separate, and to do what we were supposed to do to honor them. But the most important lesson we learned in conflict management in that season was to keep control of the tone. Whenever we're in conflict, because we're often internally more fired up than we are externally, we say things or do things that we wish we hadn't done or said. But to keep control of the tone is to decide that we are going to manage our internal so that it does not externally force us into positions and places that we wish we had not gone. So to keep control of the tone is to say, no, I'm going to continue to be honorable. I'm going to continue to be kind. I'm going to continue to be clear, not accusatory or hostile or dishonoring. One of the most important strategies for leading through conflict is to keep control of the tone, which is sometimes very difficult because we feel like we're being shoved or provoked or pushed into a corner and we come out fighting. But to know what we want to accomplish on the front end, remember, when we intentionally create conflict, we always do it with an outcome in mind. If we approach conflict with an outcome in mind, then we can continually remind ourselves to keep control of the tone as we keep pushing ourselves and the circumstance toward the outcome we had in mind. The last strategy for leading through conflict is don't make it personal. Now, this is akin to keeping the conversation missional centered, but I add it because sometimes the reason for the conflict is personal. You would not be having the conflict in your church or your office or your organization if it weren't for this person. It's not about the mission. It really is about them. Hebrews gives us some good reminders about these kinds of circumstances. It says, strive for peace with everyone and for the holiness without which no one will see the Lord. Strive for peace with everyone. Do everything you can. Now, admittedly, with some people, it's some really hard striving. But strive for peace with everyone. And even when it is personal, don't let it be about the person. Let it be about the mission. Don't devalue a person. I suspect that anyone who is watching this course is not inclined to this anyway. But I know conflict can be heated and frustrating, and sometimes we think or talk in ways that devalue the person that we are in conflict with. My wife and I have begun to occasionally attend an auction in a local community on Saturday night. It's just kind of a fun getaway. The auction is called Deals Gone Wild. I promise you, I'm not making that up. It's called Deals Gone Wild. And at Deals Gone Wild, there's a table up front where they begin to set items up on the table in order for everyone to see them better as they prepare to auction them off. A little while back, there was a guy who put a recliner on the table to auction, and then he just started piling things on top of the recliner. There were batteries for lawnmowers and lawnmower tire rims, not the tires, just the rims, 15 of them, 30 or so flamingo-shaped pool floats, and the auctioneer is saying, you're bidding on the lot, you're buying whatever is on the table. And so the man just keeps piling it on. A wood splitter, a baby gate, leaf blowers, and then he put 3 $100 bills on top of the pile, which seems like an incentive, but the bid was up to $700 at that point. What I determined from that experience is that you can put a bunch of stuff in a pile and some crazy person will buy it. But that doesn't mean it's valuable. What makes it valuable is the ability to see past the pile to the pieces. This is our responsibility as leaders, to see past the pile of conflict to the pieces, to the people who are involved, and to know that they are valuable, even if they are not valuable to our mission at the moment, even if they are not valuable to our organization at the moment. They are still created in the image of God, and they are valuable as sons and daughters of God. Repay no one evil for evil, but give thought to do what is honorable in the sight of all, Paul writes. If possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all, he writes to the Romans in chapter 12. Leading through conflict strategically is the work of a leader. It's not easy, but we're called to, and we're called to lead like Jesus in these matters. It is all about the mission for Jesus. Though he was full of grace and full of truth, and he valued everyone, he still would not be deterred. This is the challenge of leading through conflict. It's almost always a distraction from the mission, but if we can keep the conversation missionally aligned, missionally focused, if we can remember to be full of grace and full of truth, if we can remember that everyone is a dearly beloved son of God or dearly beloved daughter of God, as we work our way through conflict and advance the kingdom of Jesus, then we will have led like Jesus.